Welcome, welcome. And as the podcast channel comes on very fast live, I'm waiting for all the social medias to come up. YouTube, Facebook, blah, 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 Twitter, and all that other stuff. Welcome to You Be the Judge. We're here every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Bridges Light presents You Be the Judge. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Paul Dyer. My other two lovely co-hosts, Marylin, Pierre, and Judge Claudia, Barber. We'd like to welcome you to the day after the end of the primaries. So it's an emotional day for me personally. It is. I have been up and down, kind of sad, and then just downright pissed off. And the reason why, and I'll always tell you my reasons of why. And the reason why is because, damn it, if people did not go out and vote, we are not voting. We are not voting. We're not voting. We're not voting as a people. We're not voting as a state. We are not voting. If you look at the numbers of the total people who have thus far voted, because Maryland's going to correct me about the mail-in ballots, and I don't want to get it to the. If people who showed up to the polls is 70% already, it's under 600,000 total. We do have a state of 6 million. We have a black population of over 1 million. So that tells you that people are not voting. Okay, so if you exclude as a census under 18, we're still not voting. You're not giving me a good number here. This isn't right. We are trying to fight for the reconstruction of our lives, and people are not showing up to voice their opinion. So that's what's really hurting me. That's what's really sad to me. I'm not cared about who you picked. I'm concerned about those. I'm not concerned about why you picked them, even though that's an issue. But if you're not showing up to the polls, we have a whole other issue. That is the issue. Judge Claudia, Barber, I see you chomping at the bit. So how was your week and how you been? But jump right in. The water's warm.
Well, thank you. I am, everybody, I'm ticked off for another reason. My reason is that we're not able to count all the votes now. And that whole vetoing of the legislation that would have allowed them to unseal the mail-in ballots so that they could be counted now is really messing up the voters' information, the transparency of the election, because half the votes are counted and half of them are not counted. I actually went canvassing for several candidates on Saturday, and I ran into someone who was next door to one of the locations because I was door knocking. And this person, I didn't park far from his home, but he told me he wasn't voting and he had not voted. And I was trying to turn that train around. I'm like, what? How could you not vote? Why are you not voting? And then, I'm such and such's cousin. And he named a delegate but you're not voting. Now, I don't know what was behind that, but it's very important for all of us to try to shake that tree loose. And what I mean by that is that he could have been not voting for a mistaken reason. Like maybe he thought that because he did have a criminal record at one time.
Okay, Judge Claudia, Barbara, it bothers you. Are we that? Have you not asked the question? So you didn't want to read sometimes when you go to those election pages and get the information of who can vote, how to vote, it's kind of confusing. If you have a hard time reading, but ask some damn body.
That's true too. No, you can't ask any old body, because I think that's how that poor Texas mother got into trouble, where she was incarcerated because she wasn't eligible to vote. And I think they incarcerated her for some ridiculous 4 years or something. But that's Texas. But in Maryland, it is not. If you're out of jail, there's probably a 90% chance you can vote. And, I can't think of too many exceptions. But secondly, if I had more time with this gentleman, I probably would have brought to his attention. There are people that have been incarcerated, jailed, convicted, and turned around and ran again. And Leopold in Anne Arundel County is a perfect example of that. So stop. Don't make that a reason when it's not a reason. You on the street, you're out of jail, chances are you can vote. In fact, I understand that there's a possibility that there was more movement in trying to make sure people who were in detention centers voted, right, who have not been convicted necessarily of a crime. They still have a right to vote too. Right. And, they're just kind of the forgotten voters, but they're voters, this election in its uncertainty is something that the residents and the citizens should not be waiting and waiting and waiting. Initially, the press got you so worried that you wouldn't find out who the winning candidates are until August.
Right. That's a lie. That's a crap. They're trying to make you feel so anxiety ridden about that. No.
Well, they got that from the Board of Elections, because the Board of Elections is saying because they can't start counting the mail-in ballots until a certain time, it's going to take about 2 to 3 weeks to get results.
Correct.
Because you got to open them up, and then you've got to look at them, and then you've got to validate them, and put them through a scanner, or whatever.
Did you hear about the flash drives? Some missing flash drives?
No, tell me about that.
There's some missing flash drives with voter stuff on them. Did you hear about that, Marylin?
I have not heard about that. What county is that supposed to be in?
Oh, is it Montgomery County?
That's terrible.
But there's flash drives with the voter stuff on it, and they're supposed to be missing or they are misplaced.
Now, see, that's as irritating as it gets, because there's no true counting of votes when that happens. And even in 2000, maybe it was 2018 when I ran, I had a similar situation where the lines were backed up, and there was some stoppage of the equipment at the polls for an hour or more. Now, my first question is, when you fix that, what happens to the vote that got messed up at the time that the equipment froze? Does that person resubmit, or what? And what about all the votes that were ahead of that? Do you still have them stored there, or did they get erased?
Which is why Marilyn, how are you? If most people don't know, Marylin's running for circuit court judge in Montgomery County, and you want to talk about that?
Well, like I said, we spoke to the Board of Elections, to members of the Board of Elections yesterday, and they said, because we have to do this, because we have to do that, don't expect a final result until 2 to 3 weeks. So I'm just trying to temper my
temperament,
my patience. Yeah. And I know that the governor, the nominee for governor on the Republican side has already been declared.
Dan Cox.
And I think that's interesting. It was not a surprise to me, because I thought he did a fabulous job in terms of running his campaign.
I think so too.
Well, wait a minute. See, first of all, we have to clarify one thing. The only people, because the media, even though we're media, but we're not declaring anybody's candidacy.
Right.
So the point I'm making here is just because AP said, I am going to declare this person a winner.
Right.
That's just what I just said. It is simply that media making a decision based on the data they have.
Yep.
But that's not an official ballot result, anything.
No.
Well, I
but
think
he did crush Kelly.
Yeah.
Well,
based on what the numbers we have so far.
Right.
No. I think, though, what we should discuss as well is why that could be done. And the reason why that could be done is because they know how many Republican mail-in ballots were requested, right. And they already know how many Republicans voted in person. Right. So it's easier to declare. On the Democrat side, because most Democrats vote by mail-in ballot, and they don't go to the polls to vote. And I'm going to address that later. That's why it's more difficult to declare that. I think that is why when you hear conservatives talk about let's stop the count, that's why they want to stop the count, because at the beginning of the count, they are ahead. And as the mail-in ballots come in, their lead dwindles, and sometimes the other person running for that position surpasses them. And so they say, well, there must have been some ballots that were put in at the last moment by people who were not eligible to vote.
Like Judge Claudia Barber says, we are media, and we can't declare, but I do believe that Wes Moore is going to crush it.
Based on the data we have so far, right. It looks like... Now, see, the other thing that the other contenders have to calculate in their mind is the fact that even though you have a certain amount of absentee ballots, right. The only way they could crush it is if all of those ballots, or the majority of them, right. are going for their candidate.
Correct. That's the only way, which is mathematically impossible.
So, unless you're kind of thinking in that direction.
And after I was up all night looking at these numbers, because that's my geekiness and all this stuff, right?
I was up a good significant part of last night doing the same. So yes, I got it.
I said, if Dan Cox wins, and most people say if Dan Cox wins because he was going to crush Kelly, right? And who supports him, which is Donald Trump, President 45, right? He actually called him today, right?
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah, Trump already called Cox, congratulated him, right? And here's the thing. Whether you know Cox or not, whether you think you know Cox or not, what you ever heard about anything, negative or positive, his association to Donald Trump is alarming. Period, right? The other thing is, Maryland is supposed to be historically a blue state, which I think it's a false blue state. I think they're KKK blue. I think there's a whole new color of Maryland's blue. I don't think they're as democratic as you think they are for people, or they are for themselves and the white majority race. That's what I think. So here's what I think, and I'm going to say this the day after election. I actually think Marylanders, conservative Democrats, will rather see Dan Cox as a governor than a black man in the governor's seat. I'm just throwing it out there before the horses start running.
Well, everybody cannot be bamboozled by everything they read in the newspaper, because the news articles are getting whacked.
Right.
And some of the stuff now, I tell you something that they did against a candidate, Peter Franchot. There was this negative flyer that came out that associated Peter Franchot with Dan Cox.
Correct.
And whoever put out money to put that flyer out clearly was doing that to booster somebody's campaign, not Francho's. And it was, some smears can appear effective.
They work.
They
work on the people who don't do the work
or don't know.
Yeah, that was happening a whole lot. You saw a lot of literature, if you could call it, campaign literature for different campaigns, and you would look at the bottom to see who was putting it out, and you say to yourself, that can't be right. But but there was a lot of that. There was a lot of misdirections, misconstructions. I did not see the literature in reference to Peter Franchot, but
I did, and the message that was implicit is that he was a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Correct.
And then they had this photograph that he took with Dan Cox, and it could have been at a fair or something that he attended all over Franchot attended all over.
He was the comptroller, and it's not like it's an odd picture for him to take with Dan Cox. Yeah, you're right.
Right. So, but to pump that up and put it up all up in a flyer and, distribute it massively, to voter after voter after voter, household after household after household, messaging that stuff and doing it at a time when the other side may not have enough time to counter that, unless they came out with another flyer, which would be kind of difficult to make unless you poured a whole bunch of money into mass and it may not arrive on election day or before election day to clarify anything that was said negatively.
I'm actually going to be surprised how Maryland's going to show their butt when they have to truly decide of Wes Moore or Dan Cox. Because I am just not sure if Maryland's ready. Unless they believe, and here's the thing, they can control said Negro in the governor's seat.
Well, now here's another point, though. The Republicans have done a lot of massive mess-ups. But, it remains to be seen whether or not it's self-correcting or it might correct based on future events or what. But the Republicans have alienated women who are right to choose.
Right.
And so much to the point that they will not even trust a Republican like Dan Cox.
I don't know.
To govern state rights wise.
I think Maryland. I think if you call him, and how he believes in small business and business, independent thinking, a lot of corporation. I think those are along those lines, and school education of a choice to pick your own school, maybe with voucher systems, that resonates with a lot of people, whether they disagree with the size.
Reproductive rights.
Right.
Reversing Roe versus Wade.
Yeah, but I don't think that anybody actually disagrees with those things, to tell you the truth. Sometimes I hear like apple pie and baseball and, mother love and all that kind of stuff from candidates. And I'm like, but who actually disagrees with these things?
No one.
Exactly. So if he says that that's what he stands for, that's what he stands for. I want to ask Holly what she wants to talk about in reference to Democracy Now! Oh, you on mute.
Yeah, I'm actually writing about it because it was so good, and I sent you the link.
Yes.
Jamie Raskin gave one of his fine presentations on that, and then he was asked about the gubernatorial race, and he talked about running against Dan Cox. I just wanted to throw in also, did you see that Kelly Schultz blamed the Democrats?
Absolutely.
She did.
for Dan Cox. I mean, that.
Yeah.
Do you agree that that's a stretch?
No, because there's a lot of money that the Democrats put behind Dan Cox
To make him the primary
to make
winner.
him the primary, which is
Yeah.
why I came up with my presumptuous theory. I actually think the white Democrats would not mind Dan Cox is a governor compared to the Negro in the seat. It's not that big of a stretch when they put so much money behind Dan Cox. And there's as people who have ran for different seats, there's a lot of backdoor conversations. We don't know what is promised and what is said. And we do know by the numbers that the Democrats did put a lot of money behind Dan Cox. That's a fact. So why would they do that?
Well, they
that's
put
not
up
the
the
first-
Where is that information available?
It was
Oh,
reported in the radio today.
it's based on the dark money
Yeah.
that went into putting out the literature and the advertisements.
May I be heard for a minute?
Yeah, well,
Other Democrats in other races have contributed money to a right-wing nut. Maryland is not the only one.
and it won't be the last one.
Yeah, because
And
that's sort of like them choosing their opponent in the general.
Right.
They figure out who they think would be easier to beat in the general election, and they put money on that person so that person could win the primary. It's been done over and over again, and it has been successful, right, Will?
Yes, and I assume the Republicans do the same thing to Democrats.
I'm assuming the same thing too.
Oh, yes. In fact, when I ran in 2018, there was only one seat, but it ended up being like 4 or 5, maybe 7 people going after one seat. And I know some of those 7 candidates were stooges. They were paid to run against me to throw off my numbers.
Yes,
I'm the only one that came in. And I'm the only one that came into striking distance of capturing that the nomination on one of the party sides and I missed it by 450 votes, and it was those other candidates that threw off numbers. So there was talk of a certain Republican encouraging and financing other candidates to file a certificate of candidacy and run so that you throw off the numbers and mess her game up.
I actually think that was Rashawn Baker's idea. I actually believe that was his theory, for him to throw off votes to pull away from a person that he didn't want to be there, because if you didn't know, he is friends with Dan Cox. He's very close with Dan. So,
Oh, well, tell me more. I don't understand that.
I didn't know that part.
You think Baker threw money at Dan Cox so Dan Cox could win, or what exactly?
I think Rashawn Baker was not really planning on winning, but he jumped in the race so he could pull votes away from the other one who is particularly looked like he's going to win a Democratic, so Peter Franchot could be there, because Dan Cox can't beat Peter Franchot.
Oh, that's been done. I mean, I don't know anything about Baker and Cox or anything else, but that would not be surprising, because, like we say, it's been done before in other places. It's been done before in Maryland, so that would not be surprising at all.
It's all political strategy, and I love it, and especially when I'm in a group with people, we're trying to figure out how we're going to move to the next stage. And when you get to the next stage, it's about the way you play the cards. And when it comes to a certain level, like the gubernatorial race, this is very strategic. It is very strategic. It's not as strategic on the lower level as far as a delegate, but it still can be played that way. The delegate rate.
I apologize for interrupting you, but in Montgomery County, something really interesting happened where an incumbent delegate was not put on the slate,
Right.
and a new person was put on the slate, and it looks like the incumbent delegate, who is very popular, is going to pull through. But some people, even
I don't know what you're
people in
saying.
their own
You're saying
districts,
that they weren't put on the
people.
slate, but they were on the slate?
They did not put an incumbent delegate on the slate, and he's a very popular, and I know that Paul and Claudia, you both know him because he was the well-spoken young man that we were oohing and eyeing
Right.
about
The young
when
man.
he was at the Equity and Media meeting. They did not put him on the slate, but he's winning anyway.
Yeah, the young
But
man.
the fact that
Oh.
but the fact that they did not put him on the slate, even though he's very popular, hardworking, well-spoken, intelligent, they wanted somebody more, I guess,
They didn't want him.
a yes person. Yeah, they didn't want him. So, yeah. So even in the delegate race, it happens. It happens in all races. People want to pick and choose, and they want to. Well, sometimes they want to mislead the voters, and if that's what it takes for their candidate to win.
Well, some voters now, Dr. Dyer, you did raise the point that there were way too many people that did not vote.
Period.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, some of those folks just see a sign of signs, just see a bunch of signs on election day at the poll. And they're like, I don't know who to vote for. I don't know none of these people. So what do you say to these people that say they didn't pulled up? They got literature after literature coming at them 90 miles an hour. They're heading in for the poll. Okay, well, that person looks like a nice person. Oh, I like that sign. Oh, I like this person because of X, Y, and Z. And that's the depth or the limited information that they have. And I dare not say I would encourage them to Google them. Please, you come up with articles that, that may turn you off, may turn you on. You don't know if the articles are a plant, whether they're a smear, what?
Yeah, but I'm still going with sheer numbers. Less than 1 million people went to the polls. We are a state of 6 million. 6 million. Not 3 point something. 6 million. So we have less than 800,000 people who are voting. Everything should be thrown out. We shouldn't count a damn thing and say, okay, let's you people actually come out and give us at least over 45%. This shit's going to keep going over and over and over again until some people come to the polls. Because you cannot claim victory when 10% of the people are voting. That's a ridiculous. That's a ridiculous.
I'm smiling because there are places where if you don't vote, there are there are harsh consequences if you don't vote. And in those places, you have certain people who win the vote by like 90% or something like that. So we could, I don't know if that's the route that we want to go to.
Well, everybody has a free choice here. And the only thing, to me, the messaging has to change. And I realize and I agree with Dr. Dyer's message that we've got to do something to motivate the non-voter. But the only compelling argument, well, one of the most compelling arguments, let me put it that way, is that there is absolutely no reason when people have died for your right to vote, for you not to vote. I mean, if you think of Dr. Martin Luther King marching and John Lewis marching.
Medgar Evers getting shot.
Medgar Evers being murdered, assassinated, all for your civil rights, and it requiring key legislation and that had to survive filibusters and all that, just so you could get on the ballot. Have the right to look at Fannie Lou Hamer and her life story.
So we also know that Maryland has about just over 1 million point something, and as African Americans, as They didn't come out to vote. Not even half.
But we've got to motivate them and let them know that these people should not have died for you to sit home and not vote. That's how serious this is.
I actually believe there should be a no vote. If you still have to come and you literally check no vote. Because if the no vote wins, that's also data to tell us, say, none of you people should be on it. It's like a redo. If no vote is winning, right, by the sheer numbers, then everyone who is on the ballot is off. That's how crazy I think. Because if at least you voted, and it means no. None of you.
Well, this is the other part to that, and I was sharing this with Carl Snowden, our caucus convener, that in the down ballot races, those are the critical races. Now, you want to talk about police brutality and police accountability boards and police reform legislation and things of that nature. Whenever you have situations where a police cop, puts 60 rounds in a human being, killing them dead, the fate of that police officer may very well be decided by a judge that you vote for, a judge that you had the power to put in office for 15 years, mind you.
Now, do people understand what person that she's talking about that got shot had 60 bullets inside of him in Chicago? Does anyone know that?
Well, I thought it was Ohio.
Ohio.
Jalen Walker.
Do you know that they counted the bullets that was shot in his direction? It was over 450.
Wow. No, I didn't hear that. I heard
60. So 60 hit, but 450 went in his direction.
450. See, that's overkill. That's overkill. I don't even think if somebody did that to a dog that they would be not in jail. I don't believe that. I mean, I just think that and then it was all for a traffic stop.
Yeah.
That's it?
That's it.
The man wasn't part of a mass shooting where he just shot up 50 people. A traffic stop. It just sounds way over the top, way out of order, So, I mean, but the fact that you as a voter have the power. Now I'm speaking this kind of not literally, because I'm basing the 15-year term on the circuit court judges or the trial judges in this state. Whenever you elect them to office after they're appointed, or you choose somebody on the ballot, they have a 15-year term, but that may not be the case for all states. Some states, the term is less than 15 years. It could be 10 years. It could be 6 years. It could be 8 years. But the bottom line is that if voters are allowed to vote for judges, then that means you have the power to choose and decide the makeup of the judiciary. That's an important power, because the Judicial Nominating Commission process is just fraught with so many imperfections that we can't rely on that. That's just a system where the elite picks the elite, and the average voter has little say in who's shortlisted and gets over to the governor. That's a who knows who, and picks based on favorites and all of that. Now, the other point that could be made also is oftentimes people, when they look at Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, and they say, well, she was just picked because of her race. Now, first of all, the whole nomination or an appointment process of Supreme Court justices for over 400 years has not included Black women. And it's not like Ketanji Brown Jackson is the first person on the scene that qualified. Constance Brown Motley qualified. to serve on this U.S. Supreme Court. There were plenty of other Black women that were judges ahead of Ketanji that were eligible and could have served on the court, but they weren't picked.
Period.
See how the process is?
Yeah,
they weren't picked. You know.
Marylin, I saw Holly had a question. Could you read her question? I don't, unless Holly, what's your question?
Well, it was, okay.
I don't know how you're not doing this. We've been doing this for like 6 years. We've been on Zoom. It's been like 600 decades.
I put myself in mute.
Yeah.
I would reverse the situation. Okay. My question was, is there any evidence that the process selected better judges when the governor was a Republican? Or was a corollary is, was there any better process when the governor was a lawyer? Does anyone have a database on that? I'd be interested to know.
When the governor was a lawyer, O'Malley was a lawyer, and he is known for appointing a lot of women, but I can't give him credit at all for the fact that the Anne Arundel County Circuit Court, at the time that he was in office, was an all-white judiciary. And that particular judicial nominating commission, in part that he had responsibility for appointing people to, were just shortlisting all-white candidates. And, they were hoping that you didn't, that you wouldn't say anything about it.
Or didn't notice. Did you care? And plus the system is so messed up that there really is no effective way to challenge that, but for the fact that you run in a contested judicial election and expose it. That is not the only county where they had that gap. And for the most part, they're still doing it. After we protested at the courthouse, Hogan eventually appointed, not me, but Elizabeth Morris. But after that, there's this attitude there that, well, we've got this one person, that's enough. We should close the door and stop appointing Black people altogether. So they don't have any compunction to be fair about this at all. It's always going to be an old boy network, who you know, how well you're connected, and it's just phony. It's just flat out phony, and it's irresponsible, and it's inept. It doesn't mean you're picking up the best person. It simply means that you're putting forth and appointing people that are well connected, people that are there because because there are minimal qualifications. 5 years practicing law, must be 30 some years old, of good moral integrity. That's it. Which moral integrity?
1,000 people could qualify for that.
Well, moral integrity it's a personal interpretation. So
yeah,
exactly. What I noticed about O'Malley's trial courts commission is that they loved former assistant state's attorneys. They appointed so many of them that in Montgomery County that I even joked with John McCarthy, does someone have to work for his office in order for them to be appointed under this trial court committee? So not only did they appoint lawyers from so-called boutique law firms in Montgomery County and elsewhere, but they also appointed a bunch of assistant state's attorneys. So that if you were defending a criminal case, for instance, you had to basically go against two prosecutors, instead of a prosecutor and a judge.
Interesting point. Now, see, that raises an excellent point, because if you are going to have a court system, a fair judicial process, a fair course of administration of justice, there should be public defenders on your bench, former public defenders on your bench. You've got to have Thurgood marshals on your bench. You've got to have people who have perspective from a variety of backgrounds on your bench. And if that's missing, that I don't see how that's a fair system at all.
Well, you do get a pass if you adopt black children. So
Okay.
we do know that if you just adopt black children, you don't have
You're
to
qualified to serve on the
you're
Supreme
qualified
Court of
to
the
have
United States.
perspective.
But don't they have that right now in the current 4 sitting judges?
Which county are you referring to?
What is that? Hold on. Who's ever?
Okay, I'll mute him. Let's see. Okay, yeah, I don't know what that was, and I don't quite understand the question. Okay, I understand. Your Reynolds is asking, isn't there a public defender? I'm sorry, a former public defender on the out of the 4 sitting judges in Montgomery County? Well, there is one. And we're not saying that they don't appoint any. We're just saying that when you look at the bench itself, you see all of these
Statistic-wise.
former.
But
yeah.
here's a point that everyone should know. In one of the public forums, she said she was recruited. So you kind of want to say, well, why don't they recruit some other people too?
Right. Yeah, she was asked.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's like these people come to us, just drop down, and we just don't have the people that you might want for diversity because we don't have them.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Holly, you kind of mentioned it, and I'm glad you brought it up. Who do you think asked her to run? It was probably the other sitting judges.
Right. Or somebody on the commission.
Yeah, they're saying, hey, we need you, and they probably looked for the woman.
But see, that's the problem. The problem here is that this is all about who you know. Now, if your name comes up in a circle, it's who you know. And then all of a sudden you're asked to run, or you're asked to be to apply for a judicial vacancy. Is that how you make up your judges? Who you know? Well, then you're missing out on a whole bunch of people that you don't know.
Yeah.
So this is,
And not only that, but at this point, the people who have applied without being asked, are so harassed, and they make it so difficult for them that it discourages other people who would otherwise be applying from applying.
Well, that too, but also you have to understand how they shortlist candidates and do their deliberations. Most of the time it's confidential, but every now and again, one of the members may share one-on-one, how did they get there? And a lot of times they decide before all those candidates come in there for their interviews who they're going to pick.
Yeah.
And what they do is oftentimes, now that's why these selections are often racially biased. They will intentionally not shortlist minorities who they believe will be picked by the governor. So that's why they won't include them in the shortlist, because it lessens the chance of the people they want
right
to get on the bench. If they really want a person bad to get on the bench, they're going to shortlist that person and exclude all minorities because they want that person on the bench.
This is why when people talking about elections being rigged and people are hostile about going to a place and storming this and yelling about this, because it's so convoluted about how things work. And if you're on the out, you have a legitimate complaint. And
Yes.
if you're on the in, it's like we win. So it
Yes.
all depends on the side you're on. But ultimately, if we just look at elections really from the 10,000 viewpoint, it isn't healthy. We do not have healthy elections.
No, but we don't have processes that offer that put out the other legitimate qualified candidates, because a lot of this is just words on paper, just like all men are created equal. Really? Is Jalen Walker, created equal? Why would you, put all those rounds in him if all men are created equal? So, this whole concept, just like they put in the executive orders that the candidates that are shortlisted are the best. That's the bunch of junk. They're not the best at all. At all. They are not the best.
Bernadette, what do you got?
Calm down. anyway, yeah, I just wanted to, well, first of all, it was great voting for Marylin and a convinced household member to vote for Marylin as well, which was great.
Bernadette.
Just, you're welcome. One question about the voter turnout before I share with you, hopefully, a very interesting exchange I had with an incumbent at the poll. The voter count that we are sharing, that only reflects those who showed up at the polls, right?
Correct.
It doesn't reflect the mail-in ballots.
Correct.
Okay, because just so that you know, the majority of folks in my household, they vote by mail-in ballot. So
Wow. Okay.
I'm the one who likes going to the poll and in person voting the old-fashioned way. You know, they like to mail it in or drop it off if they're here to drop it off. Okay, so hopefully, in my household, if you just looked at the stats, you'd be like 25% of my household turn out to vote, when in fact it's much bigger.
Okay.
So hopefully we can, hold out some hope that more people voted.
I was helping several candidates at the poll. One was Marylin Pierre. And when I did meet some people at this particular polling spot, I saw only one other poll worker at this location. One. When I was there, the voters started picking up. All of the Black candidates there did vote for Marylin Pierre that I ran into and I encountered. So her message is out there, and people knew who she was on the ballot. And they said, got it. She said, I don't even need your card. I'm going to give it back to you. Okay.
I did that to other people too. But interesting thing, I came across an incumbent delegate for whom I had voted in the past. I told him that I did not vote for him this time because he did not respond to the Black Voters Guide.
Wow.
And he said, and I told him, I said, look, I'm telling you this as someone who voted for you in the past, and I actually do appreciate how you communicate with your constituents. I mean, because at least you do it on a regular basis. But you did not respond to the Black Voters Guide.
Great communication.
And what he said was, it came late to me.
Okay.
He said, here's my card. I want to meet with you so that we can talk.
Okay.
No. Hey, you know what?
Well, I could tell you, as someone who received Valerie's emails over and over again, and she extended the deadline. She was very generous with the deadline. So to say that
I wouldn't. You know what?
So I want to meet with him. I'm about to travel. I'm about to travel outside the country, but I'm going to email him. If he's serious, he says, let's get together in Starbucks. I want to speak with you.
Actually,
That's good.
you can go meet with him at Starbucks and I hope he buys the coffee. But invite him on the show.
That would be great.
Because things people say in coffee houses do not say on public air.
Well, yeah, but he also needs to know that people are insulted.
Yes, absolutely. I'm insulted.
Yeah.
Mark, go ahead.
His failure to respond to the Black Voters Guide.
I am cognizant of what Holly is trying to direct us to many, many times, which is we talk about the problems, but not enough of the solutions. Now, we talked about how voter participation is much, much, much lower than we expected.
It's hard.
But what are the solutions? I know that the people who need to vote the most are the people who actually vote the least. And that is very, very sad. I'm not sure.
That's true.
Before we get there, Mark has something to say. Go ahead, Mark.
Good evening, everyone. Mark here. I had an enjoyable time at the polls, speaking with voters that were coming. Everybody has their own style. Mine happens to be based on training I've had to understand how to influence a person based on their personality type. So I'm a very good, I can pick up on personality type very quickly. And I do use that because the way you reach a person is through influencing them to pique their interest first. So if they're coming to the poll, obviously they're coming to the vote. So I'll say bum rushing them to try to say vote for Marylin Pierre. It wasn't the approach I took. I spoke to their value, the way they looked, their opinion, their facial, draw of their face as they were coming. Did they look tired? Did they look
but here's the
like
thing.
they didn't know what they were doing, but they knew they wanted to vote, but had no idea what they wanted to do. So you use different things. But what I do want to say is I have this. Maybe it doesn't show up.
No, it doesn't.
So what? The title of it was, and I got a copy of it, is Republican Party of Montgomery County Primary Voter Guide.
Yeah.
And they were there. I was back and forth with this guy the whole night. But basically, it's an outline of everyone running, and it's critiqued in a way that makes it obvious as to who a candidate should vote for. So the voter guide is handed out to some people who would take the voter guide. They then take it right into the building, and it's checked off.
Sample ballot,
right?
And so many people, and there were I don't want to say so many. I'll bet you there was at least 20 people or so that said, "Do you guys have a voter guide?" Now, I know we wouldn't have a voter's guide, but the Democratic Party had the Democratic table at the location with all the flyers on it didn't have one. So
they can't. It's too many people.
Too many people.
It's hard to say. But
if I came up and I didn't know who I was voting for, and somebody handed me a guide and asked me a few questions and was holding the guide while they were asking me the questions, which is the way they were doing it, and they were checking off the boxes for the person who had I'm a Republican interest, and they would take that guide, which is I'm holding mine is a copy of the one I have. It's
right.
by 11. They walk inside the building, and when you go up to the machine, they look over on this sheet. They go check, 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 because that's what it is. It's, for example, one of the categories is Board of Education, vote for one. Board of Education, District 1, vote for one. Alexander Fame, J. Juan, Grace Rivera Oven, and Esther L. Wells, right? So if you didn't know who any of them are, you could be
So here's the thing.
bamboozled by the thought of,
right.
Well, what do you? Oh, if I haven't just a thought about education, I can easily influence you.
So Mark, Holly, this is a question that Holly has, and this is a question that we have put out also. We have several issues with that. If you have not done your homework, I think I'm on the thing of stay your ass home. But then I'm upset with you because you didn't show up at the damn polls. So I'm so conflicted about your dumb ass not doing the work, and then the dumb ass showing up at the polls don't know who the hell to vote for. So I'm personally I got two polls I'm arguing with all the time, and it's scary that when we get down to this personal issue, it's a whole personal issue about life and death to me. It is so poignant that this is a life and death issue. And you do not take your life seriously enough to do something. Now, you may not vote for the Board of Education. You may not vote for the comptroller. You may not vote for the dog catcher. But you're not showing up to vote for nobody? Now I don't give you that pass. You know what I mean? You may not know all the sheriffs. But you do know the sheriff is important, don't you? You mean you don't have no one that's ever been pulled over arrested? You mean that the judgeship is not important? So there's some things you don't have to vote for, but you can show up to vote for one or two.
Well, I think that one response to this is that if somebody comes to the polls and they have limited information on candidates, I think that's a given across the board. What the problem also is, what is their default? Is it Google? Is it I'm looking at news articles? Is it something else? And if the limited research tool is let me Google their name, that's still problematic.
I actually think that's why I think a no vote should be there. I know Marilyn Pierre. Go ahead.
I think that one of the solutions is to actually teach civic in schools. I think 16-year-olds should know that if they are 16 and they're registered to vote, they could work at the polls and make over $250 a day, or they could get SSL hours. When you put it in those terms, kids would be, oh, really? I am interested in that. And so when they do that when they're 16, 17, they're excited to then go and vote when they're 18.
Now, I have a question.
I agree.
I think that, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, when I was at the poll yesterday in Silver Spring, there was a young man who was there working with his dad. He's in high school. And I asked him how many of his peers vote. And he said, very, very few. He can maybe think of 2. And I said, well, I need you to become an advocate and start telling your peers what's at stake here. So, yes, that idea of educating them, because, we had a long conversation. I was just running it down to him. What's at stake? They're not being told.
Well, I will applaud Kristen. Who was Kristen Mink? Did we have her on the show once?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
She recruited young people from high school.
Yep.
She was the only person who had a poll worker at the poll where I was sent for on behalf of Marylin Pierre. And this young girl said, then another young person came to join her about a half hour later after I got there. So she was on it, and she had the poll workers, and she smashed it too in the numbers that I saw so far. So, I mean, it's not like it's not effective.
Well, she's a former teacher, so that might have been. Yeah, but that's what we have to do. And it might take a couple of cycles for us to get where we wanted to get. But the few people who came to vote, there were so very, very few young people. It was really sad because, yes, we want older people to vote, but young people are almost non-existent when it comes to the voting role.
Right.
I want to ask one thing because I always say I'm going to do the research on this, and I doubt that I will. But do you know of how many candidates do you know where people said it would be a poor choice to vote for this person? A negative piece. Does anyone know anyone other than Marylin who had...
Marylin didn't do it. She didn't do that. But there are other candidates that absolutely did. I know that for sure.
No. I don't think you're getting... I'm saying that something came out in the press not to vote for Marylin. I don't know that I've seen that for any other candidate. I just wondered if you had.
There has been.
Other candidates?
David Blair ran a negative campaign against Mark Elrick.
Yeah. Said don't vote
and in
for
the
him.
Washington Post.
Oh, yeah. But I'm saying among the candidates. I'm saying someone in the press saying that about a candidate. I think that
the Washington Post also was negative about Mark Elrick.
That's true too. You're right.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
No, I don't think so.
I think what Holly is saying is it's a different tone, because whereas some people might say, well, we're staying out of the county executive race, there were so many people who were like, well, we know it's not our race, but we're just going to let our opinions be known anyway.
Yeah, it was not that you should vote for the sitting judges. It was that it would be a poor choice not to vote for the sitting judges.
And I don't quite understand their reason anyway, because their reason is vote for me because someone else, voted for me. And I'm saying, but that's still not
That's
giving
not
a
enough.
reason to vote for
What's
you.
that?
I think he should be challenged on that. And in point of fact, you can't write to David Loveland. I would have done it. It was in the last days of the campaign, but he's impenetrable, I think. I mean, no email address, nothing.
Well, as we push on, we can continue this conversation, but we're closing off the show. We're here from 6 to 7 every Wednesday at 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. You be the judge. We're here to talk about things that are happening, information, understanding, and action. We do know that there's more to talk about. We have been talking about voting. So I'd like to thank everyone for listening. Please share, like, and love, but please be kind, compassionate, and loving. And then we'll check off here later with all our live viewers and our podcast live. So thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank
Be
you.
the judge.
Thank you, everyone. Join us next week.
I have a couple of comments.